now that we're halfway through the semester in this research subject, I thought I might take this opportunity to sort of stop and have a look around at where I am in my thinking. And a couple of things keep coming up in my mind, and one of them is the idea that research is all about change, and it's the change in the researcher that is the most important change. A change in their understanding, in their attitude, in their belief, in their practice. And the next thing is the importance of transmitting that change to others and convincing them that it is important for them, for a change in them. And I guess this is done through publications. It's also done by example too, I think. This idea of advocacy, that I spoke to Suzanne the other day about her research area, and she mentioned this idea of advocacy, and it made me stop and think and realise that the change in yourself, your behaviour, your practice, your way of being is really an advocacy for what you believe. And anyway, so the change you engender in other people through this research. The other idea that keeps coming up is that change is due to difference. Difference really is the evolutionary engine of change. Without difference, you really don't have that potential for change. And in this day and age, we're becoming aware of difference much more quickly, much more broadly, and that I think is leading to increasing rates of change. And with research, one of the driving forces, I guess, is the human desire to understand their world, to be in an environment that is predictable. So research, could be thought of an activity that is increasing our certainty about the future, our increasing the predictability, or at least decreasing the uncertainty about the environment. The environment's the physical and the social environment, I guess you could say. And we're really quite pleased as people when we can actually label and classify and name something, because then we've got it sort of covered. It's nice to say, this is a sedimentary rock, and once you've labelled that as a sedimentary rock, you can, a whole lot of hierarchical understanding sort of ripple backwards and forwards from that knowledge. You can sort of hook on things backwards and hook on things going forward. And I guess once we feel happy that we have labelled and named something, we tend to sort of leave it and not look at it again, because we've got that covered. And perhaps as researchers we should be going back and examining our understandings both of physical and social systems much more frequently, because of this increasing change I mentioned before. Now, the change doesn't happen so much in physical systems, although it does. But I mean, that's a sedimentary rock and will always be a sedimentary rock. But some of our understandings, leading up to that understanding of what this is and going forward about what that is, might be open to change. And that can change a whole range of things. So this idea of replication of research, I think, is an area that doesn't seem to get much attention. And the main reason is because, who wants to do it? Who's going to spend money on funding a research that has already been done? It's not going to get published, and that alone is probably the reason that it won't get done. But I think replication is important because, in a way, when you have a research result, it's sort of contextual. It's sort of frozen in time for that area, or that I guess, data set maybe that you had in your experiment. And those data sets, or those meaning densities, whatever, they change over time. And as I mentioned before, I think they're changing more rapidly. And it's much more important in social systems, because social systems are quite complex, and these complex systems are changing all the time because of this difference and because of our knowledge of, you know, the difference in the system. So, you know, once a researcher gathers this data, their interpretation of what that data means is influenced by their, you know, their intellectual tradition. It's just not their intellectual tradition, it's the system they're in, the observation system they're in, you know, the institutional perspectives, the sort of power systems in the system. All these things affect the analysis and the conclusions that flow from that analysis. And there's two things about that. One of them is that as things change, that meaning can change. So, you know, that initial meaning is contextual for that time, place, intellectual lens it was looked at through, and it changes over time. The other thing is, once we've got it covered, we've sort of made some, we have some expectations about what we think happens, the relationship. We tend to leave it, as I said before, and you know, in social systems, replication is probably even more important than in physical systems. So where does this leave us as researchers? Well, you know, I think what's driving a lot of the more rapid change in social systems is this increasing knowledge of difference within the system, and that's due to you know, people being connected through the internet, social networks, connected all the time, instantly. And I think this is also the tool we have to use to, you know, give meaning to what we see in the world. And I had this notion that the researcher should be more of a listener to what's going on, a listener to like the socially triangulated meaning that these social networks make. And I actually spoke to a medical researcher a couple of months ago now, and we talked about this area, and he was saying that there was an outbreak, I think in Africa, a disease outbreak that could have been identified weeks and weeks and weeks before it was actually identified by the medical profession, if they had have looked at the social network chatter that was going on. And they did this subsequently and realised that if we would have been doing this before, we would have known about this thing, you know, weeks and weeks ago, and could have acted differently. So there's an example where, you know, this socially triangulated meaning through these networks could be valuable as a research avenue. And I know I've spoken more than long ago. I just want to say one more point about these social systems and systems in general that are complex, and that is that the outcomes are fundamentally uncertain, I think. You know, we think we know what's going to happen. We feel comfortable in, you know, our expectation, our hypothesis, but in complex systems, you know, things change unexpectedly. You know, things might go the same for a long, long time, and we feel comfortable, and then they can change. So I think as a researcher, we need to be aware of those facts. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth, and I'll let you get back to your work, and I've wasted enough time. Thank you. Bye.